Hi, welcome back. This is the third video for part 2 using files. Hopefully it's the last one. We'll see. Alright, excuse me. Like I said at the end of the last video, we're going to talk more about the dir command finally. As I said before, it displays a list of the items that are in a directory. And I say it that way because it doesn't only display files. As you've seen, it also displays any directories or any other type of item that could be in a directory. Now, some of those are hidden. Some of those are just plain files. But even when they're hidden, there is a way to display those items. Already talked about attributes. So there is a switch with the dir command that allows you to display files with a particular attribute. Now, it won't display the actual attribute, it'll just display the file name. So for instance, for hidden files, you could display or see if there are any hidden files in a directory. And that's one of the troubleshooting techniques. Especially when you're cleaning somebody's computer, to double check that some malware hasn't installed some files that it's hidden, so you wouldn't notice them. Now, the default display of the dir command is what we've been seeing. So let me type dir. And the default display is the date and time that a file or directory was modified, then a blank spot here to list if the item is another directory, and then finally how big an item is, and it always displays it as the number of bytes. So this video file, this homework1.wmv file, is about 9 megabytes in size, so 9 million bytes. Actually, it's probably a little less than 9 million bytes, or I'm sorry, a little bit less than 9 megabytes, since if you do the technical calculation with the figure 1024, it comes out probably 9 times 1024 times 1024 is probably a little less than 9 mil, but if you actually had 9 megabytes, this number isn't exactly it, is really what I'm getting at. Kind of fumbling around there, I'm sorry. Alright, but what I want to do is I want to give you an idea of some of the switches you can use. One of the items is /p, which allows you to display the list of items one page at a time if the list is big enough. And this list isn't quite big enough, but the way it determines the size is, or when it should pause, is the size of the window. And so what I just did there is I shrank the size of the window so that I can force the dir command to actually stop displaying things after one page of information. So dir/p, right? And this is what it looks like when it gets down to the end. At the very top, you'll see volume in drive C has no label, volume serial number, and then the directory. Those are the top two lines you always get no matter what drive you're on, and we'll talk more about drives in part 3 when we talk about directories. And then it gives you exactly what directory you are in, which is the documents directory. And then it gives you a list of information, and then it pauses. So then it says press any key to continue, and you can simply just literally press any key like the enter key. And it displays the rest of the information, whether it takes a full page or multiple pages. And then at the bottom, it tells you how many files were displayed, And you know, it's been a while since I've looked at it, so let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. So it literally is how many files. That number is not counting the directories at all. So I just wanted to double check that. I haven't actually looked at that in a while to see what it's giving me. If it's lying and just saying files, meaning everything, or if it really did mean files. And then it does tell me, oh, you know, I could have looked below. It says 5 directories in there. And then it tells me how much is free on this particular disk drive. So if you calculate that all out, it's about 44 gigabytes free. It's like I'm going to have to do some cleaning. At any rate, I just wanted to give you a demonstration of what the /p would do. Now another switch is called the wide format switch, /w. So if I do that, what it does is it gives you a list of all the files and directory names, but without any other information. But it lets you know which are the directories by putting the directory names within square brackets. Like access is in square brackets, Notepad++ is in square brackets. Let's see. Now it did say there were 5 directories, and I don't see the rest, and I'm counting these up here, dot and dot dot. Oh, there it is, custom office templates. There it is. Okay. And when we get into part 3, we'll talk more about what dot and dot dot are. So I just wanted to point those out. Yes, those really are considered to be directories, and we'll talk more about that in part 3. All right. Now, earlier I said in this video that you could display files with a particular attribute. So that switch is /a. So let me type dir/a. Now, the A simply says you want to list files with an attribute. After the A, you have to specify which attribute. And you can only specify one attribute. So for instance, if I wanted to display all the hidden files, I would need to do H for hidden. So the letters you use here are just the same as the ones that you would use with the attrib command. And in some books or online, it'll point out that I'm not sure if it's considered proper format anymore, but that you can put a colon followed by the letter. So there's actually 2 ways to specify it. The first one is with /a colon H, and then the second one is /AH. So I'm just going to do H. That's less things to type in. So when I do this, what it does is it shows everything with a hidden attribute. There's the default RDP desktop.ini that I pointed out before, and then a couple of items that are listed as junctions. Excuse me. Junctions in Windows are like links in Linux, but I honestly do not remember if a junction is considered to be like a hard link or a soft link. And we're not going to delve into that any more than what I've just mentioned for this class. So that's something you could look up on your own if you're curious. Now I do want to point out, notice it doesn't list anywhere what the attribute is of these files. So there could be actual other attributes assigned to these files, like the archive attribute, or even system, or something else, and it's just not shown. So the /a switch only displays the files when you already know what attribute you're looking for. Now, let me just do dir all by its lonesome. And if you look, the default sort order for the dir command is alphabetical order. So you have the access directory A, then C, D, and so on until you get all the way down to T. Now, there is a switch that allows you to sort the output. And one of the things you can do is combine switches. So what I want to do is I'm going to combine the wide format switch with the sort output switch, and I want to sort it by a file extension. So I want all the Word documents together, all the Excel workbooks together, and so on. So what I'm going to do is simply type dir/w to get the wide format. Now, just to emphasize again, when you specify multiple switches, I think I talked about this a little bit in part 1, but in case I didn't, when you specify multiple switches, you have to separate them with slashes. So I'm going to go slash, and O is the switch for sorting. Yes, I know that's a little weird. Why not S? And I don't know either. Why not S? I believe there is another switch for S that was defined differently, but honestly I don't know why they didn't use S for sort and O for something else, but this is what you got. So now, just like with the /A switch, now you need to specify a letter that represents one type of sort. And on slide 13 in the PowerPoint, I do list a few sort types. And I'm going to specify E for extension. So when I do E, and by the way, just like with the A switch, you can separate this with a colon. It does make it a little easier to read, and it makes it more obvious that you're specifying an option to that switch. But it's we're already typing a lot on the command line, so not including the colon is one less thing that we have to type in. So now, specifying wide format, specifying sorting by extension, this is what we get. So the directories are all sorted first. They're not sorted alphabetically anymore. Remember the ASCII sequences, because technically .1 is a file extension. It's a number that gets sorted before any letters. So that's why that's first. Then you have B for bat, D for doc, and on. So you have the links. So everything is sorted by what their file extensions are. All right. Now, you could also sort things by date, for instance. Now, this probably wouldn't be a good time to combine sorting by date and the files because you wouldn't be able to see the date that's being specified. All you'd know is they're sorted. So if we do dir/od for date, now everything's sorted by date, and it goes oldest to newest. And let's do help dir, excuse me. And the reason I want to do this is to show you that there are a lot more switches, and what I wanted to double check was I couldn't remember how to sort in reverse order, and sort order is listed down here. What you do is you specify a dash before the item so it sorts it in reverse order. So if I want to make sure that the most recently modified item is sorted first, what I would do, I'm going to recall my command, I would specify /O and then -D. And this should sort everything most recent first. Let's see if I specified it correctly. Yes, I did. So Most recently modified items are here at the top, September 7th, today, and then September 6th, and on and on and on. So that gives you some more information about the dir command. Again, I'm going to help dir and show you that there are other things that you can specify to get more information. It's odd. I want to point out a couple of oddities. Is the /L and the /N switch are really holdovers from the fact that, one, it used to list all the file names in uppercase, so that /L would give you a list all in lowercase. And then the long list format that's the long list format that you are getting now by default. So if I did dir/n, it's exactly the same thing that you get now. Like I said, those two are holdovers from the old days, I guess you would call them. Not so long ago, really, but they're still available in the dir commands switch table. All right, done with dir for now. What I want to talk about next is some more commands. I already talked about the type command. So, and I use that to simply display a file name because I was looking for some more information. Now here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a different file. I'm going to use the putty file to just show you and demonstrate how type will simply display an entire file no matter how long it is. So let me do type putty, use tab completion, and a ton of stuff. So you can scroll backwards and look at it all, but this is a lot of lines in there to try to scroll back through. So there is another command that allows you to look at a file and page through it one screen full at a time. And that's the more command. So we have more, putty, tab complete, return, and here's the top of the file, Windows Registry Editor version 5.0. That's what created this file. And then all sorts of different key specifications that you need to have in a registry file if you're going to add a registry entries. And in troubleshooting, we'll talk more about registry entries at that time. But I just basically wanted to show you what more would do with a file that's really long. Now, at the bottom of your screen of information, it lists more and how much it's already displayed. Notice it's only displayed 20% of this file, about a fifth. And if you want to get to the next screen full of information, you can just press the space bar and it displays the next pieces of information. So more is really good for text files that are really long. Unlike type, which will display everything and you should only use when you know the file's reasonably short. Now, it doesn't hurt if you use more on short files. All it will do is if it takes up less than a screen full of information, it doesn't pause and wait for you to hit anything, just displays everything and quits. Unlike type, which has no switches, you just simply type in the file name, that's it. If you did type help type, it would simply display the way you use the file, but you'll see that, use the command, but you'll see that there's no switches to be used. Now, when you're done browsing through a file using more, you don't have to keep using the space bar to get to the end. You can just use the Q key to quit, which is what I just did. And I wanted to do that because there are some switches that more uses. And if you do help more, one of the switches you'll see is /e. So if I type /more/e, followed by my file name, what E does enables extended features. Now, at least since Vista, the extended features are automatically enabled by using a system variable. And we'll talk more about that when we do scripting. But it's already got things set. So when you use more, you can use some of the extensions that allow you to move around a little bit easier when you're within more. All right. Just a couple other switches. There's /C. Oops, didn't backspace enough. C. And what that does is it clears the screen before displaying a page of information. Since it displays a full page of information to start with, that's really only useful in a couple of situations. One, when you know the file is small anyway, then clearing the screen means it'll just display all that information, and you don't have to deal with any other text on the screen. The other possible useful reason would be if you want to basically clear the screen, and so that when you scroll back, you'll get a clear screen prior to when you use the more command. So if I use more/C, putty, and I'm going to use tab completion, all right, it doesn't look any different. But notice over here on the right side where the scroll bar is, there's nothing to go back to. I don't know really how useful that is. If it's a short file, yeah, I guess that would be useful. But really, what happens if you want to go back and you want to look at something prior to when you use the more command? You can't. So, the next, I'm going to quit out of here. The next option I want to demonstrate is where you can specify a particular line to start with when it opens up and displays the file. Now, if I scroll up, let me count the number of lines, and we have to count the number of blank lines here. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The default settings line, if I counted right. I can specify more plus 11. When you want to specify a specific line to start with, you specify the plus sign and then the line number. Then I'm going to try putty. And when I hit return, it should start at this line right here where it has default settings. No, it didn't. So what's present word? So I must have not counted right. So it started with the line after that. What I'm thinking is that I don't have a good explanation. It should have started with this if I counted correctly, unless it's not counting Windows Registry Editor version 5 as part of the file, which doesn't quite make sense. So you have to be obviously a little careful with that. It's weird. I would have to kind of play with that a bit more and figure out what's going on. All right. Now, we're in the file, so let's stay there finally. It says we've displayed 24% of the file. Now, the reason it's 24 now instead of 20 is we got a few extra lines displayed than we normally would if we just started without telling it to start at line 11. Let's say that you only want to display, or I'm sorry, let's say you want to display just a few lines next. All right, so we have agent FWD D word of all zeros. So let's say I just want to display the next 5 lines. That's considered an extended feature, so it's one of the things that you used to have to explicitly enable with the /e switch, but that are usually always turned on now. So if I do P space, and then you have to have a space, and notice that it gives me now a lines prompt. So it wants to know what lines. So I'm going to say 5. And you have to hit enter. It doesn't automatically display the lines. So here's agent FWD 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So display the next 5 lines. Now there's also a skip the next lines, but that's most useful when you really know what the data inside your file looks like, because you won't know for sure what you're skipping. Just to demonstrate it, let me move my mouse here a little bit. That's an S, and again, just like with the P, it displays a lines prompt. So at least the P and the S make sense. P for print, S for skip. So I could skip the next 5 lines, and it skipped the next 5 lines and just displayed another screen full of information. Now, one thing you can do is, if all you want to do, instead of going through one screen full at a time, you can hit the enter key and go through it one line at a time. If having everything display past you really, really quick bothers you, then you can go one line at a time. And then at any time hit space and it'll display the rest of the file one screen full at a time. Now, most of the commands, I shouldn't say that, many of the commands allow you to specify more than one file name at a time. So, let me quit out of here, and let me do dir because I want to just display a couple of file names to make sure I type them in correctly. So I have test file and test file1.txt. And what I can do is I can say more testfile.txt and testfile1.txt. And what it'll do is, since they're so short, it displays the entire thing, and you'll notice that it says 100%. But since I specified 2 files, it's going to wait to let me know that it displayed all of the first file before it displays anything in the next file. So all I need to do is press a space bar, and it displays the contents of the second file, which happens to be just one line. All right. So you have to be a little bit careful of that. I think print admin scripts will get me what I need to test. So let me do more print tab. So I think that's long enough so it displays one screen full of information so that I can demonstrate this next option, extended feature. That's part of more. And then I'm going to specify putty. And notice here that I can use tab completion twice. So it doesn't work only for one file. If I'm specifying multiple files, I can use tab completion to get the correct file names for all of the files that I want to specify on a command without having to type them in completely, or at least some of them in completely. Alright, so I've got 2 files there. Print admin scripts list.txt is, well, it's not as long as I thought it would be. What I wanted to specify was an F, so I'm going to press F here, and once I press F, it just simply displays the next file. So really I need to reverse the command, the file name, so let me do that. More putty and print. Alright, so now when I can go into PuTTY. We know PuTTY reg settings is a long file, so it's going to pause without displaying the whole thing. And I just want to demonstrate the F command. So let me do this. So now it's only 20% displayed. Press F, it just immediately goes and displays the next file. So that's what I wanted to demonstrate, that you don't have to be at the end of a file to go to the next file. As soon as you hit F, it jumps to the next file. Okay. All right. And when it's all done, obviously, it takes you back to your command prompt. Now, I'm going to demonstrate a couple of more commands here. And it looks like, yes, I am going to have to create a fourth video to keep these videos around 30 minutes long. Apparently, I talk too much. And I guess I apologize for that. But what I'm going to do is go through a couple of commands quickly and then stop and continue and finally hope we finish this with a fourth video. Alright, so the first command I want to demonstrate is the rename command. So I've got a bunch of commands here, or I'm sorry, a bunch of files. And you can use this command to rename a directory, or you can rename a file. I'm just going to play with the files. We'll play with the directories in part 3. So let's say I got tired of having spaces in my Word exam document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename, oops, if I could spell correctly, and you don't need to type the whole thing out. You can abbreviate this REN. So if I rename Miller, Mark, forget the underscores, Word, exam, space v10.docx to Miller underscore Mark underscore Word underscore exam v10.docx. Remember, you've got to specify the file extension. And I hit return. And it tells me the syntax of the command is incorrect. Why? Because I forgot to include double quote marks around the file name because it had a space in it. So again, this is another situation where having a space in a file name causes you problems. So let me just recall the command, fix this by entering in double quotes, and what I'm going to do is, since I'm taking out that space, I am going to make my upper and lower case consistent with what I was doing for the other files. And that's it. So, oh, interesting. Miller, Mark, oh, and I never noticed that I spelled word as work. All right. Here we go. That's where the command history comes in really nice, so you forget to type the right thing. And now it's work. So now when I do dir, it shows Miller Mark Word Exam V10 down here. So why did it change? Remember the ASCII coding sequence. Spaces always appear before characters. Or letters, I'm sorry. So in this case, a space appears before a letter. So it gets it gets sorted after the spaces. All right. Now, one thing I want to point out is, could I have used rename to change the case of a file? Well, let's find out. Let's change the case of Miller Mark Excel V1 to be uppercase M's in both spots of my name. So we do REN Miller underscore Mark. And why didn't I use tab completion the last time? I don't know. I probably should have used it this time as well. XLSX. All right. So what I want to do is I want to rename excelv1.xls, all right. Yeah, you have to be careful about that because it would just be very happy to change the name, rename the file name, and change the extension if you specified the extension wrong. All right. So let me do that, and let's see what it did. Well, it changed it. However, I specified the extension incorrectly. So we need to change that. So what I'm going to do now is REN Miller to tab completion. There, I want that. So if I do Miller tab completion again, even though it's displayed it the first time, it'll display it the second time if it's in the list. So I need XLSX, and it renames it. All right. Now a couple of issues here. Sorry. What I was attempting to do, I did not accomplish. I wanted to see what was going to happen if I renamed a file, and the only thing I did was change the case, and I screwed it up by specifying the extension incorrectly. So what I'm going to do is try this again with homework 4, and this time I'm going to use tab completion, so hopefully I don't muck it up again. Tab, homework 4. There we go. So what we want to do is, all right, there's my homework 4.bat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the M's to uppercase. Now, the reason I'm going through all this is I want to show what will happen when you attempt to rename a file that exists, and all you're doing is changing the case. Because remember, I told you previously that the command line and the graphical interface don't care if a file is upper or lowercase. So let's see what happens. Well, I didn't get an error, and it did it. So there are some commands that, even though you're changing the name of the file, it doesn't care. So yes, if you make a mistake when you name a file and you really want it to have uppercase characters in there, the rename command will let you change the case of letters to what you want it to really be. All right. Before I stop, there's one other command I want to demonstrate. That's the delete command. So there's actually two versions of this command, either del or erase, whichever you prefer. Obviously, I use del because it's only 3 characters long. Now, one thing you need to realize right off the bat. When you delete a file using the Windows graphical interface, it goes to your recycle bin up here. All right, and then you have to right-click and empty the recycle bin when you actually want to get rid of a file. When you delete a file on the command line, it is gone immediately. There is no version of the recycle bin for the command line. So you have to be very careful when you do delete things. However, there are some switches with the delete command that can save you. That switch is /p. So if I say /p testfile.txt, it asks me, do you really want to do this? Before it actually deletes. Now, remember before, I'm going to say no. So I type in N and then I have to hit enter. Now, one of the other switches, or let me back up. Remember we were talking about attributes that you can have read-only files. Now what the read-only does is it prevents people from editing and making changes of the file. But if they know how to use the command line, they can change that so it's not read-only anymore. It's simply removing that attribute. But if a file is read-only, one of the things you cannot do is delete it. So let me do a trib +R testfile.txt, and let me just do a trib test file. And this is something I didn't do, but you can simply get the attributes for a particular file, and it's read-only, and it needs to be archived. All right, so now if I do del testfile.txt without asking, and access is denied. All right, so that's one reason. Just like hiding a file prevents you from accidentally deleting it, read-only will also do that as well, but the file's not hidden. You can still, it'll still show up when you do dir. So that's a little bit better because then you don't forget what the name of the file is either. So you can just add and remove the read-only attribute. But if you really want to delete a file that has the read-only attribute, you don't have to do this in 2 steps. The delete command has a switch that's /f, which forces the delete of read-only files. So delete /f testfile.txt, bam, gone. Not found. So you can get around the R, but since you have to explicitly specify the /f switch, it's not easy to get around the read-only. All right. Now, there's also something called there's also a switch called /s that would allow you to delete the same things in every single directory underneath you as well. Notice here we have directories that are actually directories that are underneath our current location. So we have a custom office templates and Notepad++. So if I knew there was a specific temp file, for instance, had the same name, I could specify /s like this, del /s temp.txt, and it would delete temp.txt from every single directory starting with my current location and then moving down through the directory structure. Now I'm going to talk more about /s switch actually when we talk about directories, but I did want to bring it up. Then you can specify wildcards when you're deleting things. So right now I have a lot of stuff that starts with the word test. So let's do del test asterisk. Now, once you specify the asterisk also includes the file extension. So this is all I have to do is type the first characters that appear in the file that I want to delete. gone. Poof. So you have to be careful of that. Now, there is a way to do something what's called a global delete by specifying wildcards. And one of the switches I do talk about on slide 17 in the PowerPoint talks about how you can specify that you get confirmation for the files you're going to be deleting. That's /Q. I'm not going to demonstrate that. Now, you can also delete files based on their attributes, and that's with the /A switch that I also talk about on slide 17 as well. And if I do help del, that pretty much covers all of the switches, it looks like. Yep, I've got all the switches. So you can delete a lot of things based on a particular attribute. If you want to make sure all hidden files get deleted, you could do that. Or if you know a particular file name and you know it's hidden, you can also specify H as part of that file, so it'll look for that file. So let me demonstrate that aspect of using the attribute switch. So let me see what I have hidden yet. And I don't want to delete the current files that are hidden. That's not a good thing. So you have to be really careful when you use this. So what I will do is I'm going to do something called redirection to create a new file. And we'll talk more about redirection actually in the 4th video. And that's how I had actually created the test file before. So now I have a file out there called testfile.txt. I'm going to make it hidden. Alright, so now when I do a trib, there's my hidden file down here at the bottom. And now what I'm going to use is the /A switch with delete. Alright, now when I do a trib, it's gone. But the other 2 files that are listed as hidden are still there. So that would be one good use of, for instance, the hidden attribute. You don't want to delete everything that's hidden because some of those hidden files are system files. You don't want to get rid of them. But if you know a particular file name is hidden, you don't have to unhide it first before you can delete it if you need to delete it. Alright, that's where I'm going to stop, and what we'll do is then talk about the move command when we get back. Thanks.